This is a Fox News alert. One officer killed, another gravely injured in Kissimmee, Florida, a town just south of Orlando.
Steve Bannon is out as President Trump's chief strategist.
Bannon plans to go on the warpath against opponents of President Trump.
This is a White House that has a very specific mission. The fact that some carpenters come and go on the job site doesn't change the design of the construction.
He is 100% committed to making sure that President Trump's agenda, the agenda for the American people, succeeds.
Police in Spain are at this hour looking for suspects in 2 terror attacks.
4 people remain arrested, and the news now that 1 American dead.
President Trump holding an important meeting at Camp David with his national security team, covering issues like the strategy in Afghanistan and the threat of a nuclear North Korea.
Donald Trump does better than anybody else to sell his policies. He is the salesman. He is the deal closer.
6:01 in New York City on this Saturday morning, and we start with the Fox News alert. 2 police officers ambushed and shot overnight. One of those officers is dead.
It happened in Kissimmee, Florida. That's right outside of Orlando near Disney World. The second officer gravely injured in that same shooting is now fighting for his life.
Ellison Barber live for us in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Ellison, good morning.
Good morning to you all. 3 suspects are in custody, and police say right now they are looking for a 4th. Police Chief Jeff O'Dell says the officers were responding to reports of suspicious persons when they came under fire shortly before 9:30 p.m. The chief says his officers responded to the initial call at approximately 9:27. 5 minutes later, at 9:32, the first call came in for an officer down. Both officers were transported to the hospital with grave injuries. Officer Matthew Baxter died. Officer Sam Howard remains in, quote, grave condition.
These were beloved fathers and husbands and sons, and so we are doing everything in our power to support them, the families, and get them through this time.
At a press conference, Chief O'Dell said this appeared to be a, quote, consensual encounter. No handcuffs. Officers would have asked the people if they lived in the area, what they were doing, and if it checked out, moved on. The Kissimmee Police Department is a smaller one. According to the Orlando Sentinel, it has 104 officers. Today, words of support and calls for prayers from neighboring departments and from President Trump as well. He tweeted this morning that he sends his thoughts and prayers to the department. This is the first time a Kissimmee police officer has been shot and killed on the job in more than 20 years. Guys?
All right, Ellison Barber down in our nation's capital. We thank you very much. She's absolutely right. Last time they had a death in the police department was 1993, but just this wave where you have 6 different police officers shot in 2 different states. It's unbelievable. The Kissimmee shooting apparently was an ambush.
Yeah, and Officer Matthew Baxter, he was a 3-year veteran of the department there, married to another police officer. They had 3 kids.
And
just so heartbreaking.
Get to that ambush point for a moment. When you hear some of the details about they were in this consensual conversation, as you heard Ellison describe it. They were just talking, and all of a sudden a shooting happens. This wasn't a chase. This wasn't a shootout or anything like that. This was an ambush.
Yeah.
And it really does underscore how perilous the situation is for cops in this day and age when people feel emboldened to ambush them like this. This isn't the first time, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it'll be the last.
Yeah, we'll keep a close eye on this story all morning long. But some other big news came out yesterday from the White House. Steve Bannon, one of the chief strategists there, he's saying he will go to war for Trump from the outside now. So the question now, is this the start for the administration that they've desperately needed to start a new chapter and move forward with their agenda?
There you see Steve Bannon, who used to work at the White House until yesterday. He returned to Breitbart, and Reince Priebus, once upon a time, the chief of staff, both of them now out. Apparently, you know, the story is that it's a mutual decision, but apparently John F. Kelly, the chief of staff, was pretty steamed, as was the president, about Mr. Bannon's appearance in the American Prospect magazine a couple of days ago, where essentially he mocked the president's fire and fury comments. And so they came to an agreement he would be out. But it does leave a hole in essentially the ideological team that took Mr. Trump to the White House. Keep in mind, absolutely, and we've heard the president say, you know, Steve Bannon came late in the campaign, which is true. He started, I think it was August 15th, 16th, something like that last year. But Donald Trump was down double digits. And Steve Bannon and his popular message, which appealed to the working class, looks like that's what turned things around.
Yeah, so he's now responding, Steve Bannon, to the rumors that he was forced out of the White House. Here's what he's saying about it. He says, if there's any confusion out there, let me clear it up for you. I'm leaving the White House and going to war for Trump against his opponents on Capitol Hill in the media and in corporate America. This is something that Democrats and the media have talked about, that he could actually be more effective from the outside, and that scares a lot of Democrats. But for the base, for the Trump base that are fighting for his agenda, they're saying maybe he can actually do a lot more to pressure some of the lawmakers on Capitol Hill to push through some of the things that Trump has been fighting for.
When I heard the news, the first thing that I thought of was there are a number of people, number of Republicans, both in the administration and on Capitol Hill, that did not sleep very well last night. They are going to now get that pressure that, quite frankly, Steve Bannon could not exert publicly from the inside. Now that he's back at Breitbart, he can really force the issue on so many of the issues that he brought to the Trump White House, and that's what David Bossie talked about last night right here on our air.
I mean, you mentioned General John Kelly, Steve. Whenever you bring in a new chief of staff, you know that changes are going to be made, and you see how many have been made since he has taken on that role. He has come in and he has cleaned house. I think he's saying, you know, we need to start a new chapter in this White House. He's someone that I think saw a lot of different lanes going to the president. Everyone was wanting the ear of President Trump, and he went in there and said, we're going to have to change the way things are working.
There was a lot of infighting, and there were power struggles as well. And it's interesting, those two people in that picture right there, McMaster and also Mr. Bannon, did not get along. And so when Mr. Bannon says he's going to go to war essentially with the White House Democrats, he's talking about Gary Cohn, the guy who used to run Goldman Sachs, who is a Democrat famously, Ivanka, Jared, people like that. But also at the same time, he's going to be going against Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. Right. I mean, Paul Ryan at least got some stuff passed through the House that's on the Trump agenda, but Mitch McConnell didn't. Anyway, David Bossie was on, as Todd said a moment ago, last night on the channel, and depicted a little bit about what he's going to do going forward, Mr. Bannon.
Steve Bannon is an honorable soldier in our effort, and somebody who is going to, as I said, lift up the president's agenda. Now, if he has policy disagreements with people inside the White House, where he was handcuffed while he was inside the White House,
it's a different ballgame.
It's a different ballgame now, and he may not have those same handcuffs as it relates to individuals inside the White House who he doesn't believe carries the president's agenda wholeheartedly.
So here's the big question. Is famously Steve Bannon on the wall of his White House office had a great big whiteboard, and it had all of the campaign promises that Donald Trump made during his time running for president of the United States. And one by one, he would check things off. Who will be the keeper of the agenda? If you think about it, if the president's agenda were to become more moderate, a lot of those things no longer would hold. So who going forward, if anybody, would replace him? Kellyanne Conway obviously is still going to be there, it looks like. David Bossie, who we just saw in that soundbite, he's been suggested as the chief strategist, as has Corey Lewandowski. Then again, maybe the president feels he is the best strategist for Donald Trump, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that. But as you can imagine, when this broke yesterday, you had Democrats, the DNC, Nancy Pelosi, others making their own statements, their own judgment about what they think is going on there. This is a statement from the DNC. They say that there is one less white supremacist in the White House, but that doesn't change the man sitting behind the resolute desk. This one comes in from Nancy Pelosi, says Steve Bannon's firing is welcome news, but it doesn't disguise where President Trump himself stands on white supremacists and the bigoted beliefs they advance.
You know, that language, I don't know what that advances in the national discussion. We have a nation that, quite frankly, is hurting right now. And I don't know if those words do anything to advance the narrative going forward. It just, you hear that, it's all negativity. Negative, negative, negative.
It's identity politics at its worst. It doesn't do anything to bring this country together.
Well, look, it's so far been a loser for the Democrats. I mean, that's what they have relied on for a while. They don't really have any other message right now, so they're just defaulting back to to that particular message. Is it going to be effective going forward? Stay tuned for that.
Actually, that's exactly what Steve Bannon said in that interview yesterday, of talking about identity politics and focusing on race. He said Democrats, he hopes that they stick to this message. He says it's a losing issue for them. He says Democrats talk about identity politics. I got them. I want them to talk about racism every day. If the left is focused on race and identity and we go with economic nationalism, we can crush the Democrats. I mean,
right. That's a soundbite he gave to the American Prospect. That was that left-wing publication, it leans to the left, publication that came out. It's like Steve Bannon said, I thought I was off the record. And then the reporter came out and said he knew he was on the record.
Which, remember we said that to Newt Gingrich? Newt Gingrich, his head almost exploded when I jokingly said that was off the record. He's like, oh, come on, not even close. But, you know, Steve Bannon's a smooth operator. He knows what he's doing. And let's not forget that Steve Bannon did say he was only going to be here for about 8 months to a year. Well, August 14th is a year.
Yeah.
So.
And let's look, the White House has some work to do. They've got to start really moving forward on their agenda. And you hope that this really does press the reset button and start a new chapter.
But they have been moving forward on the agenda. They just haven't had the help of a number of U.S. senators on the Republican side, which hasn't really helped them so far.
Well, we'll
so going forward with Steve Bannon across the street at Breitbart, will that help the president move his agenda forward? I'm sure the White House hopes that's a yes.
All right, well, more on that later on the show, but turning now to some other headlines we're following, starting with a Fox News alert and the hunt for the most wanted man in Europe intensifying right now at this hour. Authorities now say Yunus Abu Yaqub is the cold-blooded terrorist behind the wheel who mowed down innocent people in the heart of Barcelona. 2 other suspects, part of that massive terror network, they are also still on the run. This, as we learn, the jihadi authorities initially named as the main suspect was actually one of the 5 killed in the second terror attack hours later. 14 innocent people were left dead in the back-to-back massacres, including Jared Tucker, a father of 3 from San Francisco, who was sadly on his vacation with his wife. I think they were celebrating their first anniversary together. So heartbreaking. And a stabbing spree in Finland is now being investigated as an act of terror. Police say 2 people were killed and 8 injured by a knife-wielding attacker in the western city of Turku. The 18-year-old Moroccan citizen now in the hospital after being shot by police in the thigh. The motives are under investigation. 4 other people were also detained in connection with that attack overnight. Also this morning, Boston has expected thousands to attend protests of a free speech rally this afternoon. The number is significantly increasing in the wake of the deadly Charlottesville protest last weekend. To keep peace between protesters and conservative activists, the city is now deploying more than 500 police officers and banning anything that might be used as a weapon. Those are some of your headlines this morning. We'll watch that closely this afternoon. It's just been quite a week.
It has indeed. All right. Meanwhile, coming up on this Saturday, back open for business. A new report out this morning says the president and his team are seriously looking at how they can start sending more terrorists to Gitmo. Haven't done that for a while. Details on that report straight ahead.
Plus, he's one of the most recognizable faces in all of professional basketball. But what Charles Barkley just said about the removal of Confederate statues is shocking everyone this morning.
A Fox News alert as the manhunt continues for the van driver in that horrific terror attack 2 days ago in Spain. New details now revealing an even deadlier plot by the terror cell.
Spanish police saying the bombs that caused the house explosion in the nearby town of Alcanar were actually the terrorists' failed plan A for the attack in Barcelona. So, how deep does this terror cell's influence run in that region?
Joining us with his reaction is Mobin Sheikh. He was once radicalized when he was a teenager. He's a former jihadist and a terror expert, and now is helping us all try to make sense every time these horrific attacks happen. Mobin, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how should we be thinking about this as we wake up this morning?
Well, there are a number of ways to look at it. I mean, one of them is that this is something that we are supposed to be expecting, or at least I have been expecting by ISIS in Europe. I've been saying this